I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice.
I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table.
The Willowbrook Estates HOA thought they could steal my grandfather's farm while I was deployed in Afghanistan.
Built their perfect suburban paradise on stolen land.
Tennis outfit Karens patrolling in golf carts.
A corrupt city councilman rubber stamping illegal zoning changes. Families who had no idea their dream homes were built in a floodplain.
What they didn't know? I'm an Army Corps of Engineers specialist.
And that little earth dam on my property? It had been waiting 45 years for someone stupid enough to build downstream.
They diverted my water, stole my land, tried to destroy my reputation.
Called me unstable. Threatened me with psychiatric holds. So I opened the gate. The sheer force of the water is unleashed, a reminder of nature's unstoppable power.
This is the story of how federal water rights, a 1923 deed, and one controlled spillway release,
How a $200 million development became worthless overnight. How justice flowed like water, exactly where it was always meant to go.
Grab something to drink. This is gonna take an hour. And trust me, every second is worth it.
And this is how I flooded the valley to save the creek.
My name is Jake Morrison.
Let me take you back to 1955. My grandfather, everyone called him Pops, bought 47 acres of prime Texas land just outside Austin for $8,000. Can you imagine? 47 acres for $8 grand? It wasn't fancy. No mansion, no pool. Just rolling pastures, a modest farmhouse, a barn, and Willow Creek running right through the property. Clear water, good grazing land, and enough space that you could stand on the back porch and not see another soul for miles. Pops raised cattle, nothing industrial, maybe 30 head at most. He'd sell a few each year, enough to pay the taxes and keep the land maintained. But this wasn't about money. It was about legacy, about having a place that was ours. In 1978, Texas went through one of the worst droughts in recorded history. Pops watched Willow Creek slow to a trickle. His cattle were suffering. But more importantly, the farmers downstream, families who'd been there as long as we had, they were losing everything. So Pops did something smart. He contacted the Army Corps of Engineers and got proper permits to build a small earth dam. Not a massive concrete structure, just a well-engineered earthwork designed to collect rainwater during the wet season and release it gradually during dry spells. That dam wasn't just for us. It was for the entire watershed. Miguel Santos's family farm 5 miles downstream, the Chen family's orchard, a dozen small operations that depended on Willow Creek. Pops taught me everything about that dam, how the spillway worked, how to monitor water levels, how to calculate safe release rates. I was maybe 10 years old, following him around with a notebook writing down everything he said. Those lessons stuck. When I joined the Army at 22, I specialized in exactly that: water management, infrastructure, hydraulic engineering. 2 tours in Afghanistan, building irrigation systems, managing water resources in active combat zones. Pops passed away in 2021, right in the middle of my second deployment. Heart attack. Quick and painless, they said. He was 89 years old. The property went into a family trust managed by my sister Sarah. She lives in California, works in tech, has 2 kids. She's not a farmer, never pretended to be. So she hired a local property management company to handle the basics, pay the taxes, maintain the fences, keep squatters off. What she didn't do was check the county tax assessments, didn't monitor the zoning board meetings, didn't know that vultures were circling.
I got back from Afghanistan in August 2023. Honorable discharge after 12 years of service. I was ready to come home, take over the family property, maybe lease some pasture land, live a quiet life. I drove up the long driveway at sunset, and I knew immediately something was wrong. The back 40, where Pops used to graze cattle, was gone. And I mean gone. Survey stakes everywhere. Concrete trucks, construction equipment, half-built houses. Not just a few houses, dozens. I parked my truck and walked through what used to be the south pasture. That were McMansions, cookie-cutter suburban houses, each one probably 4,000 square feet, packed together on quarter-acre lots, vinyl siding, 3-car garages, HOA-approved beige. And the signs. Oh, the signs. Willow Creek Estates, a gated community. HOA regulations strictly enforced. No trespassing. No trespassing on my land. I called Sarah immediately. She was horrified. Turns out she'd been getting notices from the property management company, but they were all marked routine correspondence. She thought everything was fine. What actually happened was this. While I was overseas, a development company called Thornwell Properties LLC filed an adverse possession claim on the back 40 acres. They argued that since the land appeared abandoned and they'd improved it substantially, they now had legal right to it. Adverse possession is a real legal concept. If you occupy someone else's land openly, continuously, and without permission for a certain number of years, in Texas it's 10 years, you can actually claim ownership. But here's the thing. Our land wasn't abandoned. We had an active property management agreement. We were paying taxes. This shouldn't have been possible. Except it was possible, because Thornwell was owned by Rick Thornwell, and Rick Thornwell was a city councilman, and Rick Thornwell's wife, Margaret Thornwell, was president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA. Let me paint you a picture of Maggie Thornwell. 52 years old, blonde highlights that cost $400 every 6 weeks, drives a white BMW X7 with vanity plates that say HOA Prez, treats tennis outfits like business attire, the kind of woman who calls the cops if your garbage cans are visible from the street. The first time I met her, she was standing at the entrance to her development, hands on hips, while I was trying to access the back corner of my own property. "Can I help you?" she asked, like I was selling magazine subscriptions. I told her I owned this land, all of it, including the 40 acres her precious HOA was built on. "Oh, honey," she said, "honey, your family abandoned this land years ago. We're just putting it to good use for the community. You should talk to our lawyers if you have concerns." Our lawyers, like they owned it. Like 70 years of my family history didn't matter because they filed some paperwork and I was busy getting shot at in Kandahar. But it got worse. I walked up to the dam, Pop's Dam, the one he'd built with Army Corps permits and federal approval. The water level was way lower than it should have been for August. I followed Willow Creek upstream and found exactly what I feared. They'd diverted it. The HOA had installed a concrete channel that redirected the Willow Creek away from its natural course, routing it around their development and straight into a drainage system that dumped into a different watershed entirely. They'd cut off the water supply to the dam. They'd cut off the water supply to every downstream farmer who depended on Willow Creek for 70 years. And they'd done it without a single federal permit, without an environmental impact study, without any of the legal requirements exist specifically to prevent this kind of ecological disaster. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was a federal crime, and I was going to bury them.
The first thing I did was hire a lawyer, not some small-town attorney. I needed someone with federal experience. I found Amanda Cross. Former EPA prosecutor, now in private practice, specializing in environmental law and water rights. She looked at my case for about 10 minutes and said, "Jake, this is the most clear-cut violation of the Clean Water Act I've seen in 5 years. If what you're telling me is true, the federal government is going to be very interested." Amanda explained that any dam built with Army Corps of Engineers involvement creates federal jurisdiction. That meant the local zoning board, the city council, even the county, none of them had authority to override federal water rights. I spent the next 2 weeks in the county records office. I pulled every document related to my property going back to 1923, and that's when I found it. The 1923 Water Rights Deed. My great-grandfather had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. In Texas, water rights are separate from land ownership, and senior rights, rights established first, take priority over any rights granted later. That meant my family had legal first claim to every drop of water in Willow Creek. The HOA's diversion? Illegal. Their drainage system? Illegal. Every single house they'd built that relied on redirecting that water, built on a foundation of theft. But I needed more than dusty deeds. I needed evidence of current harm. So I bought trail cameras and installed them along the creek. I started taking daily water flow measurements. I documented every cubic foot of water they were stealing. That's when I realized something even worse. The entire Willowbrook Estates was built in a 100-year floodplain. A 100-year floodplain means there's a 1% chance every year that the area will flood. You can build there, but you need flood insurance, special permits, elevation requirements, and you absolutely need a FEMA-certified flood mitigation plan. Guess what Willowbrook Estates submitted as their flood mitigation plan? Permanent diversion of Willow Creek into alternative drainage. They told FEMA and the insurance companies that they'd solved the flood risk by stealing my water. That's federal insurance fraud. That's lying to FEMA. That's 35 families who bought homes thinking they were safe from flooding, when in reality, they were sitting in a natural floodplain with zero actual protection.
Maggie found out I'd hired a lawyer, and she went nuclear. First, she posted on the neighborhood Facebook group that I was an unstable individual who was threatening the community. She claimed I'd been seen surveilling children with cameras, the trail cameras I'd installed to document water flow. Then came the wellness checks. She called Veteran Services claiming I was exhibiting concerning behavior and might be a danger to myself. I had social workers showing up at my door asking if I was okay. She filed noise complaints claiming I was running loud machinery at 3 a.m. I don't even own loud machinery. She reported my truck for illegal parking, even though it was parked on my own property. Then she went on the local news. Channel 7 did a whole segment about dangerous dams and property owners who refuse to modernize. This showed B-roll of my dam with ominous music like it was about to collapse and kill everyone downstream. "We're just trying to keep our community safe," Maggie said on camera, wearing her tennis outfit and pearls. "This dam is 45 years old. It's never been properly inspected, and Mr. Morrison has refused all our offers to help modernize the water management system." Every word was a lie. The dam had been inspected by the Army Corps of Engineers every 5 years like clockwork. It was in perfect condition, and they'd never offered to help. They'd offered to buy me out for a fraction of what the property was worth so they could demolish the dam entirely. But the propaganda worked. I started getting dirty looks at the grocery store. Someone slashed my tires. I got anonymous letters calling me selfish, telling me to sell and move on. It would have been easy to give up. Take their lowball offer, move somewhere quiet, forget the whole thing. That's what they were counting on. But I didn't serve 2 tours in Afghanistan just to let some corrupt HOA steal my family's land, and I definitely wasn't going to let them destroy a watershed that dozens of families depended on. I called in reinforcements. My old Army buddy, Tony Riggs. Tony works for the EPA now in the Water Enforcement Division. I sent him everything, the photos of the illegal diversion, the measurements, the documents showing they'd never filed for federal permits. Tony said, "Jake,
This is a Clean Water Act violation, unauthorized diversion of a navigable waterway. Fines start at $50,000 per day, and it's been, 2 years? You're looking at tens of millions in penalties. The net was tightening, but I still needed the downstream farmers. If this was going to be about community versus corporate greed, I needed the community on my side.
Maggie found out I'd hired a lawyer, and she went nuclear. First, she posted on the neighborhood Facebook group that I was an unstable individual who was threatening the community. She claimed I'd been seen surveilling children with cameras, the trail cameras I'd installed to document water flow. Then came the wellness checks. She called veteran services claiming I was exhibiting concerning behavior and might be a danger to myself. I had social workers showing up at my door asking if I was okay. She filed noise complaints claiming I was running loud machinery at 3 a.m. I don't even own loud machinery. She reported my truck for illegal parking, even though it was parked on my own property. Then she went on the local news. Channel 7 did a whole segment about dangerous dams and property owners who refuse to modernize. This showed B-roll of my dam with ominous music like it was about to collapse and kill everyone downstream. "We're just trying to keep our community safe," Maggie said on camera, wearing her tennis outfit and pearls. "This dam is 45 years old. It's never been properly inspected, and Mr. Morrison has refused all our offers to help modernize the water management system." Every word was a lie. The dam had been inspected by the Army Corps of Engineers every 5 years like clockwork. It was in perfect condition, and they'd never offered to help. They'd offered to buy me out for a fraction of what the property was worth so they could demolish the dam entirely. But the propaganda worked. I started getting dirty looks at the grocery store. Someone slashed my tires. I got anonymous letters calling me selfish, telling me to sell and move on. It would have been easy to give up. Take their lowball offer, move somewhere quiet, forget the whole thing. That's what they were counting on. But I didn't serve 2 tours in Afghanistan just to let some corrupt HOA steal my family's land, and I definitely wasn't going to let them destroy a watershed that dozens of families depended on. I called in reinforcements. My old Army buddy, Tony Riggs. Tony works for the EPA now in the Water Enforcement Division. I sent him everything, the photos of the illegal diversion, the measurements, the documents showing they'd never filed for federal permits. Tony said, "Jake, this is a Clean Water Act violation, unauthorized diversion of a navigable waterway. Fines start at $50,000 per day, and it's been, 2 years? You're looking at tens of millions in penalties." The net was tightening, but I still needed the downstream farmers. If this was going to be about community versus corporate greed, I needed the community on my side.
Not every year, but when it comes hard. The Weather Service started predicting a significant storm system, remnants of a Gulf hurricane pushing inland. This was perfect. A natural weather event, historical precedent for high water flow, and legal justification for emergency dam management. I notified the Army Corps of Engineers that I'd be conducting routine spillway maintenance and testing. I notified the county emergency management. I notified every downstream property owner. I did everything by the book. Maggie found out. She went ballistic. She showed up at my property with Rick and 2 HOA lawyers. "You open that dam and we'll have you arrested for domestic terrorism. You'll go to prison." I showed her the Army Corps permit, the agricultural covenant, the documented obligation to maintain natural flow patterns. Rick tried the political angle. "I have connections, Morrison. You do this and I'll make sure you never get another permit for anything in this county. Your life will be hell." I told him to get off my property before I called the sheriff for trespassing. They tried everything in those final days. Emergency restraining orders, denied because I had federal permits. Complaints to the EPA, who laughed because Tony was already investigating them.
They even tried to get me committed for a psychiatric evaluation. A county mental health evaluator showed up. Maggie had filed an emergency petition claiming I was delusional and dangerous. The evaluator talked to me for about 30 minutes. I showed him my discharge papers, my engineering credentials, my legal documents. He looked at Maggie's petition and literally laughed. "Ma'am, this man is a decorated combat veteran with an engineering degree. He's not delusional. He's exercising his legal rights. This petition is frivolous and potentially defamatory." The rain started on September 15th, light at first, then steady. The dam reservoir was filling. I monitored the levels every hour. The gathering. On September 17th at 7 a.m., I assembled my team. Amanda was there with legal documentation. Tony brought 2 EPA agents, Miguel, Mrs. Chen, and 4 other downstream farmers, a county surveyor to document the creek flow, and a local news crew, because if this was going to happen, I wanted it on record. Maggie's last stand. Maggie showed up with a megaphone and about 20 HOA residents. She was live streaming on Facebook. "He's going to flood our homes. He's going to destroy our community. Someone stop him." The reporter from Channel 7 asked her, "Mrs. Thornwell, are you aware that this dam has federal permits and that Mr. Morrison is legally obligated to maintain natural water flow?" "That's not the point. He's doing this out of revenge. He wants to hurt us." I ignored her. At 7:02 a.m., with federal agents watching, I opened the first spillway gate to 25% capacity.
The hydraulic system hummed to life. The gate rose smoothly. Pops had built this thing to last. Water began flowing through the spillway, a controlled release, exactly as designed. At first, it was just a trickle, then a stream. Within 5 minutes, it was a river of clear Texas water flowing down the original creek bed that hadn't seen water in 2 years. And that's when everyone saw what the HOA had done. The water hit the concrete barrier they'd installed to permanently block the creek. Water doesn't negotiate. Water doesn't care about property values or zoning laws. Water goes where gravity tells it to go. The natural creek bed curved through the western edge of Willowbrook Estates, not through the houses, around them. If they'd left the creek alone, their development would have been fine. But because they'd blocked it, because they'd tried to erase it completely, the water was pooling against their concrete barrier. And as I opened the second gate to 50% capacity, that pool became a pond, and then a lake. Maggie was screaming into her phone, "It's flooding! He's flooding us! Send the police! Send the National Guard!" The Channel 7 reporter walked down to the water's edge. His cameraman filmed the scene. You could see the natural creek bed clearly, carved by a century of water flow, visible in the landscape even after 2 years of forced drought. "Diane, I'm standing here at Willow Creek, and what we're seeing is actually water flowing in its natural, historic channel. The development appears to have been built with a concrete barrier blocking this creek, and now that the dam is releasing water at normal seasonal levels, it's simply going where it's always gone."
"That's not a creek. That's flooding. He's flooding children's homes."
"Ma'am, there are no homes being flooded. The water is contained within the natural creek bed. However, there does appear to be a significant drainage issue caused by the concrete barrier blocking the original water course." I stood on the dam with my arms crossed, watching. The water was flowing exactly as my models predicted. The downstream farmers were gathering along the creek, some of them crying as water returned to their land for the first time in 2 years. "It's flowing! Jake, it's really flowing!" Mrs. Chen was laughing and crying at the same time. "My trees! I can save my trees!" Meanwhile, at Willowbrook Estates, Maggie was directing her neighborhood's panic. Some residents were filling sandbags, even though the water wasn't anywhere near their houses. Others were evacuating for safety. Rick Thornwell arrived in his Mercedes, running toward me with his face purple. "You son of a bitch! You're destroying millions of dollars in property value. I'll have you arrested. I'll have you—" One of the EPA agents stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. This is a federal water management operation being conducted under proper authority. If you interfere, you'll be subject to arrest." Rick actually sputtered. "Federal? This is a local matter. I'm a city councilman." "Sir, Clean Water Act violations are federal crimes. Your position as councilman is actually going to make your situation worse, not better. I suggest you contact your attorney." Over the next 3 hours, as the water continued to flow, the EPA agents began documenting everything. They photographed the illegal concrete barrier. They measured the creek flow. They inspected the diversion system. Tony pulled me aside. "Jake, this is worse than we thought. They didn't just divert the creek, they buried it. There's a culvert system under those houses routing the water to a completely different watershed. They literally tried to erase Willow Creek from existence. That's destruction of a natural waterway. That's wetlands violations. That's habitat destruction. Every single one of those houses was built on top of an illegally buried creek." Amanda was on the phone with FEMA. Turns out, when Willowbrook Estates filed for flood insurance certification, they'd claimed the creek no longer existed due to natural changes in hydrology. They'd lied to federal agencies to get cheaper insurance rates. More Willowbrook residents started showing up. Some were angry at me, but others, once they saw the water flowing in a clear, defined creek bed that obviously predated their development, started asking questions. One guy, mid-40s, contractor type, walked up to me. "That creek was here before they built the neighborhood? Since before Texas was a state, Willow Creek has been flowing through here for thousands of years. They told us this was a drainage easement. They said it was part of the development's stormwater management. They lied. They buried a natural creek, built houses on top of it, and gambled that no one would ever restore the water flow." "So our houses are built in a floodplain?" "Yes. And our insurance doesn't cover flooding because they told the insurance companies this wasn't a flood zone." "That's fraud, and you're victims of it." Within an hour, that homeowner had called 10 other residents. They gathered away from Maggie, talking among themselves. Some were on phones with their insurance companies. Others were pulling up their property disclosures. Willowbrook Estates was fracturing. The residents who'd been manipulated were realizing they'd been lied to. The ones who'd trusted Maggie were turning against her. And Maggie? She was still live streaming, spinning conspiracy theories about veteran extremism and property terrorism. Rick made the fatal mistake of trying to bribe Tony. Right there in front of multiple witnesses, he pulled Tony aside and offered him $50,000 to delay the federal investigation until we can sort this out politically. Tony pulled out his badge. "Sir, you just attempted to bribe a federal agent. You're under arrest." 2 EPA agents cuffed Rick Thornwell right there in the mud. Maggie screamed. The news cameras caught everything. Rick's political career ended in handcuffs in a half-flooded development he'd illegally approved. I kept the spillway at 50% for 6 hours. The creek filled completely, flowing strong and clear. The downstream farms were celebrating. The trees were drinking. The land was healing. At 2 p.m., I began gradually closing the gates, 25%, then maintenance level. The creek would keep flowing now. The dam's job was done. But the legal aftermath, that was just beginning. The federal hearing was 3 weeks later. United States District Court, Western District of Texas. Amanda represented me and the downstream farmers. The Department of Justice sent a prosecutor. The EPA filed as an intervening party. Across the courtroom, Maggie Thornwell, Rick Thornwell, out on bail, 3 lawyers from a major Austin firm, and representatives from the development company. Judge Patricia Mendoza entered, former environmental attorney, appointed to the bench by Obama, reputation for not tolerating corporate nonsense. Opening statements. The HOA's lawyers tried to paint me as an extremist. a dangerous veteran with a grudge who'd weaponized a dam to destroy property values. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison deliberately flooded a residential neighborhood, causing millions in property damage and terrorizing 35 families. This wasn't about water rights. This was revenge. Amanda stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to present the 1923 water rights deed, the 1978 Army Corps Dam construction permit, the agricultural covenant requiring maintenance of natural flow patterns, and EPA documentation of the defendant's illegal creek diversion. Mr. Morrison didn't flood anyone. He restored a creek that the defendants illegally buried because it was inconvenient. She put up aerial photos on the courtroom monitors, before and after. The natural creek bed visible in 1960s surveys. The same creek bed buried under concrete in 2021. The water flowing naturally in 2023 exactly where it had always flowed. She showed the trail camera footage of the HOA's contractor pouring concrete directly into the creek bed. No permits, no environmental review, just burying a waterway because it was inconvenient. Then came the FEMA documents. The HOA's flood certification application claiming Willow Creek no longer exists as a natural. Then came the FEMA documents. The HOA's flood certification application claiming Willow Creek no longer exists as a natural waterway due to changes in regional hydrology, signed by Rick Thornwell as the authorized developer representative.
Your Honor, this is federal insurance fraud. Mr. Thornwell certified to FEMA that a century-old creek had somehow naturally disappeared, when in reality he had personally approved construction permits to bury it under concrete.
Judge Mendoza leaned forward. You could see her expression shift from judicial neutrality to barely concealed anger. Tony Riggs took the stand. He presented the EPA's findings with clinical precision.
The defendants diverted approximately 2.3 million gallons per day from Willow Creek without any Clean Water Act permits. They destroyed 1,847 linear feet of natural waterway. They eliminated 4.2 acres of federally protected riparian habitat. They caused direct harm to 6 downstream agricultural operations, and they lied to federal agencies about all of it.
I watched Maggie's face as the evidence mounted. The entitlement was draining away, replaced by the slow realization that she wasn't going to talk her way out of this. Then Rick Thornwell took the stand. Huge mistake.
Amanda destroyed him. Every answer he gave contradicted something he'd said earlier. He tried to claim he didn't know about the creek. She showed him his own signature on the diversion permits. He tried to claim it was a drainage ditch, not a natural waterway. She showed him the 1923 survey maps.
And then Amanda asked the killer question.
Mr. Thornwell, when you approved the zoning change for Willowbrook Estates, how much did you stand to personally profit from the development?
I didn't profit.
Your Honor, I'd like to submit tax documents showing that Mr. Thornwell owned 30% of Thornwell Properties LLC through a shell company. He personally made $4.7 million from this development, a development he approved in his capacity as city councilman.
The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Mendoza's gavel came down.
Mr. Thornwell, you approved a development from which you personally profited millions, and in doing so, you illegally diverted a federal waterway, committed insurance fraud, and violated the Clean Water Act. Do I have that correct?
Your Honor, I can explain.
I don't want your explanation. I want to know if those facts are accurate.
Rick's lawyer whispered something to him. Rick slumped. Yes, Your Honor. Amanda called Miguel Santos to the stand. He testified about losing 40% of his crop yield over 2 years, about the $72,000 in water hauling costs, about nearly losing his grandfather's farm.
That creek, it's not just water, it's life, it's our history. My grandfather chose this land because of Willow Creek. When it stopped flowing, it was like someone turned off the sun.
Mrs. Chen testified about her orchard. 30-year-old peach trees dying from drought stress, her retirement savings invested in trees that were withering because someone decided a creek was inconvenient.
I'm 68 years old. I don't have time to plant new trees and wait for them to grow. Those trees were my retirement. They were what I was leaving to my children.
One by one, the downstream farmers testified. The real people, the families who'd been farming this land for generations, the ones who depended on Willow Creek not because it was profitable, but because it was part of the ecosystem their grandparents had built their lives around. And across the courtroom sat Maggie in her designer clothes, and Rick with his expensive lawyers, and representatives from a development corporation that built disposable McMansions on stolen land. The HOA's lawyers tried one last time. They argued property rights, economic development, the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few.
Your Honor, 35 families live in Willowbrook Estates, hardworking people who bought homes in good faith. Are we going to destroy their property values because of a technicality about a creek?
Amanda stood slowly. Your Honor, those 35 families are also victims here, victims of a fraudulent development scheme. But the solution isn't to reward the fraud. The solution is to hold the fraudsters accountable and make the victims whole. My clients aren't asking for the development to be demolished. They're asking for the creek to flow. They're asking for their water rights to be restored. They're asking for justice. Judge Mendoza took less than an hour to deliberate. When Judge Mendoza returned, her expression was carved from stone. I've reviewed all the evidence presented. This case is extraordinary in the scope of its violations. The defendants didn't make a mistake. They didn't misunderstand regulations. They deliberately, systematically, and fraudulently destroyed a natural waterway for financial gain. Mr. Morrison's water rights, established in 1923 and reinforced by the 1978 Army Corps Agreement, are senior to any rights claimed by Willowbrook Estates. The diversion of Willow Creek was illegal under the Clean Water Act. The burial of the creek bed was illegal. The failure to obtain federal permits was illegal. The false statements to FEMA constitute federal insurance fraud. Mr. Thornwell's approval of a development from which he personally profited without disclosure of his financial interest constitutes criminal corruption. The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. Maggie gasped. Rick went pale. Their lawyers started whispering frantically. Thornwell Properties, LLC is ordered to pay $12 million in EPA fines for Clean Water Act violations. The HOA is ordered to pay $487,000 in compensatory damages to downstream farmers for 2 years of water theft. Mrs. Thornwell is personally liable for $8.7 million in punitive damages for her role in maintaining the illegal diversion. Mr. Thornwell faces criminal charges for corruption, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. I'm referring this case to the U.S. Attorney for criminal prosecution. Within 90 days, the defendants will restore Willow Creek to its natural course. The concrete barriers will be removed. The buried culverts will be excavated. The creek will flow freely, as it has for millennia. Any property damage resulting from this restoration is the sole responsibility of the developers who built in a known floodplain. The 35 homeowners in Willowbrook Estates have standing to sue the development company for fraudulent misrepresentation. Water doesn't care about property values. Water doesn't care about HOA bylaws. Water flows where nature intends it to flow. The defendants tried to eliminate a creek. All they succeeded in eliminating was their own credibility and freedom. The gavel came down. Maggie was crying, not the manipulative tears she'd used on TV, real tears of someone watching their world collapse. Rick was already in handcuffs. Federal marshals had been waiting for the verdict. Miguel hugged me so hard he lifted me off the ground. Mrs. Chen was crying happy tears. The other farmers were shaking Amanda's hand, thanking her over and over. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting. Channel 7 was there, the same reporter who'd covered the spillway opening. Mr. Morrison, how do you feel about the verdict? I feel like justice was served. This was never about revenge. It was about restoring what was stolen. From me, from the downstream farmers, and from the creek itself. Water wants to flow. We just had to remove the people who were stopping it. What do you say to the residents of Willowbrook Estates who were now facing property devaluation and potential flooding? I say they're victims too. They bought homes believing they were safe and legal. The development company lied to them. But the solution isn't to keep the creek buried. The solution is for those homeowners to sue the people who defrauded them and get made whole. Maggie pushed through the crowd, mascara running, designer bag clutched to her chest. You destroyed everything. You destroyed our community. I hope you're happy. I looked at her directly. I didn't destroy anything, Maggie. I restored something your husband tried to erase. There's a difference. Her lawyer pulled her away before she could respond. That was the last time I saw her in person.
The criminal trial took 8 months. Rick Thornwell was convicted on 5 federal counts: corruption, conspiracy, insurance fraud, Clean Water Act violations, and making false statements to federal agencies. He got 3 years in federal prison. His political career was over. His development company declared bankruptcy. Maggie fought the civil judgment but lost every appeal. She declared personal bankruptcy. The $8.7 million judgment meant she lost everything: her house, her cars, her entire lifestyle. Last I heard, she moved to Oklahoma, works in retail. No more BMW, no more tennis outfits, no more HOA power trips. The Willowbrook Estates HOA was formally dissolved. The development became just another neighborhood, without the gates, or the rules, or the pretense of exclusivity. The 35 homeowners filed a class-action lawsuit against Thornwell Properties. They settled for $4.3 million, enough to cover flood remediation, proper insurance, and some compensation for property value loss. The creek restoration took 4 months. I supervised it personally, working with Army Corps engineers. They removed all the concrete, excavated the buried culverts, regraded the banks, and planted native vegetation. When they opened the last barrier, Willow Creek flowed freely for the first time in 3 years. Clear water, steady flow, exactly as nature intended. Miguel's farm recovered. His crops came back strong. He paid off his water hauling debts and started expanding his operation. Mrs. Chen's orchard recovered. Not all of them. Some were too damaged, but enough that she could keep the orchard running and pass it to her daughter. All the downstream farms recovered. The ecosystem recovered. Fish returned to the creek. Birds came back. The land remembered what it was supposed to be. My property value skyrocketed. Turns out owning senior water rights to an entire watershed in Texas makes your land extremely valuable. I had offers. Big money from developers, from conservation groups, from tech billionaires wanting a ranch. I turned them all down. This land is staying in my family. The dam is staying functional, and Willow Creek is flowing free forever. I used some of the settlement money to set up a trust fund. It pays for ongoing dam maintenance, creek monitoring, and provides emergency assistance to downstream farmers if there's ever another drought. Miguel's farm heart, full circle. Miguel's family had been talking about selling their farm before all this happened. The costs were too high, the water too uncertain. But after the creek restoration, I helped him buy out his siblings' shares and secure the property for his kids. I put a permanent conservation easement on my property. No future owner can ever divert Willow Creek, no matter how much money someone offers. The creek is protected forever. My life now. I live in Pop's old farmhouse. I fixed it up some. New roof, updated kitchen, but it's still the same place where he taught me about water rights and responsibility. The view from the porch. I can sit on the back porch and watch Willow Creek flow. I can see the healthy pastures. I can see the dam doing exactly what Pops built it to do, holding water during wet seasons, releasing it during dry ones, serving the community, continuing the legacy. I consult now. Water management, property rights disputes, helping farmers understand their legal protections. I use what I learned in the Army and what I learned fighting the HOA to help people protect their land and water. Because this wasn't just about my property. It wasn't even just about Willow Creek. It was about standing up to corruption. It was about protecting natural resources from corporate greed. It was about proving that sometimes the little guy can win.
People ask me if I regret how it all went down, if I wish I'd just taken the buyout offer and moved on. Never. Not for a second. This was about more than money or property. It was about legacy, about keeping promises, about understanding that some things, clean water, natural ecosystems, family land, are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. If you take anything from this story, take this. Know your rights. I mean, really know them. I spent weeks in dusty records offices pulling 100-year-old deeds. That research saved everything. If I hadn't found that 1923 water rights deed, I might have lost. Document everything. Every measurement, every photograph, every interaction. My trail cameras and flow data were crucial evidence. In legal battles, documentation beats memory every time. Understand the science. I'm an engineer. I could prove exactly what would happen when I opened those gates. I could show that the water would flow naturally and safely. That expertise gave me credibility. Build alliances. I didn't fight alone. I had Amanda, Tony, Miguel, Mrs. Chen, and a dozen others. We were a community standing against corruption. That's powerful. Don't back down from bullies. Maggie tried everything: intimidation, character assassination, legal harassment, even attempting to have me committed. If I had folded, she'd have won. But bullies are used to people folding. When you stand firm, they don't know what to do. But here's the deepest lesson. You can't fight nature. You can try. You can build dams with permits, redirect flows legally, manage water responsibly, but you can't eliminate a creek that's been flowing for thousands of years. Water is patient. Water is persistent. Water will always find its way back to where it belongs. Rick and Maggie thought they could erase Willow Creek with concrete and paperwork. All they did was create a disaster waiting to happen. I learned in Afghanistan that infrastructure isn't just about engineering. It's about understanding human needs, environmental reality, and long-term consequences. The best water projects work with nature, not against it. Pops understood that. When he built the dam, he didn't try to control the creek. He tried to help it, smooth out the extremes, protect the downstream farmers, maintain the natural flow. He worked with the water, not against it. The HOA's fatal mistake was thinking they could impose their vision on a landscape that had been functioning perfectly for centuries. They wanted a suburban paradise without inconvenient natural features. They wanted property values without ecological responsibility. Reality doesn't care what you want. Reality, physics, hydrology, ecology follows laws that no city council can override. Some people called this revenge. It wasn't. Revenge would have been vindictive, disproportionate, cruel. What I did was restoration. I gave back what was taken, from the creek, from the farmers, from the land itself. Did Maggie and Rick deserve what happened to them? Maybe, maybe not. But consequences aren't about deserving. They're about actions having results. They stole water, buried a creek, defrauded homeowners, and corrupted the zoning process. The consequences followed naturally, like water flowing downhill. The homeowners, I do feel for the 35 families who bought homes in Willow Brook Estates. They were victims of fraud. But the answer isn't to perpetuate the fraud by keeping the creek buried. The answer is to hold the fraudsters accountable and help the victims recover, which is what happened. Today, Willow Creek flows clean and strong. The dam operates exactly as Pops designed it. The downstream farms are thriving. The ecosystem is healing. And I sit on my porch every evening, listening to the water, knowing I kept my promise. Not just the promise to Pops, though that matters. The promise to the land. The promise to the community that depends on that water. The promise to future generations that this creek will still be flowing when they're sitting on this porch. If you're facing something similar, a corrupt HOA, a corporate land grab, powerful people trying to steal what's yours, know that you can fight back. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, but if you have the law on your side, the science to back you up, and the courage to stand firm, you can win. My dam stands, Pop's Dam, built with federal permits, maintained with care, serving the community just like it was designed to do. It held water for 45 years waiting for someone stupid enough to build downstream. Rick and Maggie thought they were building a legacy, Willow Brook Estates, their suburban empire. Instead, they built a cautionary tale. And me, I just opened the gates and let nature do the rest. This is Jake Morrison. The creek flows free, the land is protected, and justice, like water, found its way home. Y'all take care, and remember, you can't fight a river, but you can sure as hell let it fight for you.